Tomatoes are another produce that if you have a plant that produces a good crop, you could end up with an abundant supply that you need to figure out what to do with. One of the favorite things here in our house is tomato juice. You know, like the V8 kind of juice. It's just straight tomato juice, and we love it. To make tomato juice, you cut out the core, the center of a tomato. Once you have the core cut out of a tomato, you just cut it into medium-sized pieces, not removing any of the skin, and place it in a saucepan. Once you have your tomatoes in the saucepan, you're going to put it on heat and slowly bring it up to a boil. The juice will begin to extract from your tomato, and it will begin to boil. After the tomatoes begin to boil, then you cover your pot and let it simmer for 15 minutes. But you're going to need to stir it frequently so that it will not stick. Once the tomatoes have boiled or simmered for 15 minutes while it was covered, you'll be surprised at how much juice is in the tomatoes. Now we're going to use even another new tool in the canning world. This is a food mill. What you do is you put the juice, or the entire tomato, all the contents of this pan, in here. Once you spin it around, only the juice will come out the bottom. The peelings and seeds will remain in the top of the mill. So using a scoop of some sort, whatever you have available, just something that, because this is still very hot, that you can scoop out your tomatoes. You actually dump that down in the mill, and then you begin cranking. And I'll try to lift this up so you can see the juice comes out down below. Once you've placed all of the tomatoes in your mill, you will go back and forth so that it extracts all of the juice. And you're only going to be left with seeds and peeling left in the mill, and the juice should be in the bowl down below. Then you just simply dump out any remaining. If you have a large quantity of tomatoes, you're going to be dumping your peelings out as you add more in. After you have your juice in your bowl, return it to a pan, rinse out and clean out your pan because you'll have some seeds left in it. Return the juice to your pan and let it simmer on the stove for 5 more minutes. You do have to have a large quantity of tomatoes to can tomato juice. I'll be very curious myself to see how much juice this results in. This was 4 large tomatoes from the market. When we have a large pile of tomatoes from our garden, this is my first choice, is to make tomato juice. If we don't have quite a large quantity, I will opt for freezing tomato sauce. Just a synopsis of how you freeze tomato sauce. You just take your whole tomato, cut out the center, put it in a blender. Totally just annihilate it in the blender, then pour it in a pan like this, peelings and all, into the pan, and then you let it boil for probably a good 30 minutes. It'll start foaming a little bit on top, which is fine. Just stir it. Once it cools down after 30 minutes or so, just put it in freezer containers and you have frozen tomato sauce. And it does wonderful in chilies and goulash, anything that calls for tomato sauce. Whether you do tomato juice or tomato sauce, I do need to mention, cut off the bad parts of the tomato. Tomatoes that come out of our garden are not round and perfect like they are in the market, so they do have bad spots, so cut them off in either case. So this has been on the stove for another 5 minutes, and now you have your tomato sauce, your tomato juice that you can ladle into your jar. Okay, we're getting down to the bottom here. Let's see how much will pour into this. Oh my, if that's not... yeah, we just have a dribble left. Not planned at all. We just have a dribble left in the pan. This was 4 very large tomatoes. If you remember, they looked like this when we began. And we have just removed the peeling and the seeds, put it through the food mill, and you've ended up with just your tomato juice. To a pint, you add a half a teaspoon of salt. To a quart, you add a teaspoon of salt. So we're going to go ahead and add a half a teaspoon to this pint. Go ahead and take your moist paper towel and clean off the top lip of your jar so that you can have a good seal. Add your flat and your ring and snug it tight. Pints and quarts, this is one of the rare times that they process for the same amount of time in a hot water bath canner. So both a pint and a quart processes for 35 minutes. You begin timing the 35 minutes after your pot begins to boil. So put this in a pan. This would not be tall enough. So if you're looking around your kitchen, you have to find a pan that is taller than your jar so the water can go on top of your jar. Once that begins to boil, that's when you begin your time. This is a completed jar of tomato juice that we had in the cupboard. You will know if it has sealed properly if it does not make this noise. This one is not sealed. We have not processed this one yet, but there's a chance that you would still obtain this noise after you have canned if there's a particle in the way of the seal. You want it to have no noise. There's no pushing to make a noise, and so this is properly sealed. And so you have now two ways that you can do tomatoes. If you have a really large quantity, tomato juice would be the way to go. If you have just a few tomatoes, take the time, throw them in the blender, boil them in your pan, and then freeze them in a freezer container, and you will have tomato sauce ready at your fingertips.